SEP Readings presents Accidental Proposal by CJRed. Chapter 31. Tequila. Hermione! Hermione jumped out of her daydream of burning down every bridal boutique in Europe and turned to glare at Pansy. No. Pansy glared right back and stood firm. Yes, you are the one who wanted a muggle dress, so get off your arse and get back in that dressing room. We have 3 weeks left to find that dream dress of yours, and we are running out of stores. Hermione gave a prolonged sigh and shuffled back into the dressing room. She had been eating a light lunch in a dressing gown, hoping that someone would come rescue her, when Pansy had rounded the corner with what looked like 5 more dresses for her to try on. She didn't doubt that the other girls that were part of what she secretly called the bridal posse were also looking for more dresses for her to try on. They had been looking for a dress for the better part of 2 months, while at the same time they hit up shops to get inventory for their own shop. All of this meant that Hermione had spent way more time inside clothing stores than she could stomach. Pansy was the buyer for the new store the witches had opened in Diagon Alley. The witch had an eye for fashion. Tracy had put herself in charge of accessories, and Daphne and Ginny were decorating the shop and displays. Hermione had been amazed at how well the shop was doing. They already had made a good start on paying back Lucius Malfoy for his starting investment, something all the witches had insisted on doing. Pansy spent all of her time finding the clothes that they sold so that she had put herself in charge of making sure Hermione kept looking for her wedding dress. 3 times a week, that meant Hermione gave up her afternoon so that Pansy could try wedding dresses on her. So far, however, no dress seemed just right, and Hermione would be worried if she wasn't so over the entire wedding process. But with 3 weeks to go until the big day, Hermione was now being dragged to boutiques every afternoon. She might not mind giving up her afternoons if she wasn't also giving up her mornings as well. Narcissa had taken over planning the actual wedding itself. This meant that Hermione spent every morning attempting to have an opinion and being shot down, while Narcissa planned the wedding of the century. After 6 weeks, Hermione had just decided to not have an opinion, and when Draco asked how it was going, she threw something at him. Because no matter how much she begged, he never seemed to have time to deal with planning the event. The Pratt claimed he was too busy planning the honeymoon. So here Hermione was, stuck in another bridal boutique and contemplating getting very drunk. 6 dresses later, Hermione was ready to cancel the wedding. She sat dejected, looking at the wall, while Daphne sat on the floor, shaking her head at her friend. "Maybe we should just hire someone to make a dress for you," Daphne said quietly. Hermione let her head fall back and hit the wall of the dressing room with a loud thud. "The problem is I have no idea how to articulate what it is I want." Daphne sighed and then nodded. "So, what do we know? Let's focus on that and maybe we can narrow this down. What do you hate about all these dresses?" Hermione frowned and sat up, looking over at the pile of tulle and silk. "I don't want to look like a stupid cupcake, so all of those full-skirted ones need to go. I hate tulle and lace because it itches, although I suppose if the lace was soft I wouldn't mind." Daphne nodded and waved at the dresses. "Okay, what about the different colors of white?" Hermione considered that. I don't like bright white. It washes me out and pansy bitches." Daphne giggled. "That's true. What about the soft whites or ivories?" Hermione nodded. "Those are okay. I like ivory best." Daphne was thoughtful. "Yes, you don't seem to complain as much about those dresses." Hermione snorted and then frowned. "I like trains, even though it's totally silly to all of you. I really do want a train on my dress." Daphne rolled her eyes but nodded. "Okay, so no tulle, make the dress ivory with a train. What else, Hermione?" Hermione paused and then sighed. "I do want it to have something unique, maybe magical on it. Maybe embroidery with magical thread?" Daphne sat up, her eyes going wide. "That's a brilliant idea, Hermione. Maybe that is what is missing." She pulled over her purse and dug into her bag, pulling out a parchment and quill. "Okay, what are you thinking? Nothing as trite as the Malfoy crest, right?" Hermione burst into laughter and sank down onto the floor with Daphne, her eyes bright with excitement. "No! Oh, Merlin, no!" She chewed on her lip and then said softly, "Flowers. I want the flowers that bloom around the lake every spring. Corn poppies, tansy, cornflowers, knapweed, Devil's bit. Daphne cut her off, holding up her hand and chuckling. I get it, Hermione. Just give me a second. And she got to work creating a beautiful chain of flowers, and one large bunch of wildflowers tied with a ribbon that had hers and Draco's initials on it. How is this? Hermione had tears in her eyes as she looked at the parchment. Oh, Daphne, I love it. Daphne gave her a large smile, and then peeking her head out to make sure that there were no muggles looking, she pulled out her wand and hit the parchment, mumbling a spell, and then pointed at the one dress that Hermione had sort of liked and had a rather long train. Hermione watched in awe as golden thread started forming the flowers on the train, and then jumped up, pulling the train closer to her to look at it. Oh, wow. Daphne was nodding. This is what was missing, I think. Something unique. We can use enchanted thread so it glows. Hermione nodded, wiping at her eyes. I love this, but not on this dress. Daphne laughed and quickly wiped the dress clean. Well, we made progress finally, though. Now go out there and stick to ivory dresses with trains and bring them all back in here. Hermione felt her heart start to beat with excitement as she rushed out, hearing Daphne calling over the girls, most likely to show them the embroidery she had come up with and to tell them about the new plan. Hermione found that when she had something to narrow the dresses down with, it was much easier to find something to try on that she actually liked. No full skirts, no tulle or scratchy lace, only ivory in color, and must have a train. It took a bit, but in the end she walked back with 5 dresses, all with different bodices and sleeves, but all at least with the skirt she had decided on. Pansy was waiting with 3 more dresses, and Ginny, she saw, was adding a few flowers to the parchment while Tracy was talking to Daphne about ideas for the thread they could use. 2 hours later, and one confundus charm for the Muggle shopgirl who had wandered in at the wrong time, Hermione had finally found her dress. It was stunning, and she had to wipe her eyes a few times as she stood in it. She had a long, soft ivory veil that Pansy had charmed to be as soft as cashmere, and Daphne had added the embroidered flowers, too. Ultimately, she had fallen in love with a sweetheart neckline with long sleeves. The dress was luxuriously silk, also in soft ivory, and had no tulle or lace. Ginny shook her head, stunned. Oh, Merlin, with the gold thread, this is going to be simply stunning. Pansy nodded, walking around Hermione with a satisfied smile. And the flowers around the cuffs of the sleeves was simply brilliant. Tracy nodded, looking at the embroidery carefully. I think so, too. And Ginny is right. With a magical thread, this will be stunning work of art. Well done, Hermione. You will blow them away. Hermione smiled and let out a sigh of relief. So, no more dress shopping? Everyone laughed at her, with Ginny hitting her on the head. If you had just told us months ago you hated lace and wanted an ivory dress, we might have had this marked off the list weeks ago. Hermione giggled and then shrugged, her tone a bit defensive. Well, I think it took me all this time to figure that out. It's not like I have ever really put much thought into things like this. Pansy gave a long, suffering sigh. I am just dressing you from now on, and I won't hear any complaints. You, Hermione Granger, are terrible at shopping for yourself. Hermione smirked, ducking her head, rushing to change out of her wedding gown, and thankful for magic. It should weigh a ton with its long train and heavy silk, but it was feather light, and Pansy had assured her that the train would be charmed to not get dirty, and shrunk once the reception started. So, did you ever settle on colors with Narcissa? Pansy asked as she helped Hermione out of the dress. Purple, 3 different shades, and gold as an accent color. Daphne sighed exasperatedly. 3 different colors of purple? Hermione nodded, pulling her jumper on. Yes, 3. She rolled her eyes and then grinned cheekily. I at least got to pick one of the purples that are being used, so I consider that a win. Ginny laughed, walking in with a pair of silk ballet slippers. Hey, what about these? We can charm them ivory and embroider them to match the dress. Tracy took the shoes and then smiled. You won't have to wear heels after all, Hermione. Hermione laughed, happily touching the soft ivory shoes. Oh, thank Merlin. Now, if you can only convince Narcissa to use wildflowers instead of roses. Tracy made a face, handing the shoes back to Ginny. Roses? She said, her tone horrified. I thought you said you hated roses. Hermione nodded. I do, and they bloody well make me sneeze. I will probably have a red nose and puffy eyes by the time I make it down the aisle. Pansy put her hands on her hips. I told you to put your foot down about the stupid roses. Hermione snorted. I tried. She started crying hysterically and gave me a headache. So I just told her to do whatever she wanted so that I could escape. Daphne shook her head, looking horrified. Oh, Hermione, no! Tracy was nodding while Ginny looked angry. You got played, Tracy said with a small smile. Ginny shook her head. I would have hexed her before I gave in on the roses. Pansy got an evil glint in her eye and pointed at the chair. All right, Hermione, sit down and tell us what else you just caved on because the woman made a scene. 20 minutes later, her bridesmaids were looking at her horrified. Hermione, whose wedding is this exactly? Hermione sighed. Well, honestly, I think it's Narcissa's, and Draco and I are just showing up. Ginny looked over to Pansy, her eyes narrowed. This is a crock. Pansy nodded, absolutely livid. Oh, I agree, and we only have 3 weeks to fix it. Daphne snorted as Tracy pulled out her quill and some parchment from her own purse sinking to the floor in a large plush dressing room. We can do that, was said confidently by the witch, her eyes alight with a rather manic gleam. Oh, definitely, Daphne said, sinking down to the floor as well. Let's start with making sure there is champagne there. Just because Narcissa has never had it doesn't mean you can't serve it at your own wedding. Then we can talk about the food. You hate fish, Ginny said, sounding annoyed. Honestly, Hermione, you should have called in backup. Hermione flushed. That would have meant I had to talk about the wedding more than I already was. She wasn't sure who conjured the pillows, but 4 of them hit her in the head, and they had to move the planning party to the Paris townhouse when the store closed. 8 hours later, her wedding was replanned. Pansy had agreed to inform Narcissa, and Hermione had bought an entire bottle of tequila and decided to do shots so that she couldn't think about the meeting tomorrow morning with her soon-to-be mother-in-law. When Draco showed up with a raised eyebrow and a confused expression, he learned a valuable lesson in life. Never ever talk to a witch on a straight tequila night, because whatever that spirit was, it turned his usually mild-mannered witch into a raving shrew. Hermione, for her part, might have felt awful because she woke up with no memory of the night before, and singing the blues into the toilet before she could even get a hangover potion down. Draco figured that she had suffered enough and didn't bring up the night before. He also had the elf remove the tequila in case today was another bad day. It wasn't that he blamed Hermione for drinking. No, he would be drunk too, dealing with his mother every day. And this was the first time she had overindulged. Draco just didn't want her making herself sick again. That drink was poison. Thankfully, with Pansy on her side, Hermione was shocked to see that a rather contrite Narcissa had caved and allowed the changes to the wedding Hermione wanted. Pansy, how did you do that? She whispered as they left without a tear being shed. In fact, Narcissa had actually had the grace to look embarrassed when Pansy had confronted her about the whole mess. Pansy snorted. You have a lot to learn about being a Slytherin, Hermione. The next time she even looks like she is starting to cry, stop talking and give her a look like you used to give Harry and Ron when they peeved you off. If that doesn't work, you leave the room, but you never ever cave and give that witch her way. Hermione flushed, but had to admit it would probably prove to be more successful than her trying to placate her soon-to-be mother-in-law had been. I just worry I'm going to push her into another breakdown. I would feel awful. Pansy gave her a long look. Yeah, get over that, because Narcissa Malfoy will milk any weakness for all she is worth. Hermione sighed. Compassion shouldn't be a weakness. Pansy gave out a long laugh and linked her arm with her soon-to-be sister-in-law. Oh, my sweet little lion, you have no idea. Now come on, let's go celebrate. I could use a drink. Hermione groaned. No tequila, please. Daphne gave her a confused look. What on earth is tequila? Pray you never find out, Hermione said, rubbing her still-upset tummy.